Salve omnes, welcome to this video lesson on Imperium Romanum, Capitulum Primum, Chapter 1, the Roman Empire. Now, Imperium can also mean power or command, but here it does mean empire. And we're going to have some geography in this chapter, a little bit, a touch of that, and some introduction to Latin vocabulary, Latin grammar at the basic level, Chapter 1. Now in the picture we see insula. You might be able to guess that means island. Insulation is a derivative, an English word that comes from that. We see oppidum, which is a word for a town. And we see fluvius, which is a river or stream. All right, and let's start into the story. Roma in Italia est. You'll notice there's a kind of trill to the R's in Latin. Rome is in Italy. Now notice the word order though. Rome in Italy is, okay? Also notice that Italia here has a long mark or a macron, that is the line above the final A. That means that A is pronounced for twice as long, and the reason is that it's something called the ablative case. Don't worry too much about it yet, but basically it means, hey, Italia is the object of the preposition in. Rome is in Italy. Italia in Europa est. Italy is in Europe. Now notice again the word order in Latin. Frequently Latin verbs are at the end of a sentence, so it says Italy in Europe is. Notice again Europa ends with a long A, again because it is the object of the preposition in, technically called the ablative case. Graecia in Europa est. Greece is in Europe. Italia et Graecia in Europa sunt. Now notice we've changed from est, is, to sunt because that is the plural verb are. Italy and Greece are in Europe. Hispania quoque in Europa est. Spain also in Europe is, or as we say, Spain is also in Europe. Hispania et Italia et Graecia in Europa sunt. Spain and Italy and Greece are in Europe. Aegyptus in Europa non est. Egypt in Europe not is, or as we say, Egypt is not in Europe. Aegyptus in Africa est. Egypt is in Africa. Gallia non in Africa est. Gaul is not in Africa. Gallia est in Europa. Gaul is in Europe. Now, most of these places we should probably know where they are, but Gaul, I will just say, is basically modern-day France and Belgium, that area of the world. Syria non est in Europa, sed in Asia. Syria is not in Europe, but in Asia. Now, Syria is, well, it's like modern-day Syria, so it's north of Israel and in the Middle East. Arabia quoque in Asia est. Arabia is also in Asia. Syria et Arabia in Asia sunt. Syria and Arabia are in Asia. Germania non in Asia, sed in Europa est. Germania or Germany is not in Asia, but is in Europe. And notice again on each of these sentences that when you have the preposition in, those words following have the long mark on the final A. Again, noting, hey, I'm an ablative case, that is, I am an object of the preposition in. Britannia quoque in Europa est. Britain is also in Europe. Germania et Britannia sunt in Europa. Germany and Britain are in Europe. Esne Gallia in Europa. Is Gaul in Europe? Gallia in Europa est. Gaul is in Europe. Esne Roma in Italia. Roma in Gallia non est. So, is Rome in Gaul? Rome is not in Gaul. Another thing I want to point out here, they've got out in the margin est ne, and they've separated the two parts there. Est is, and then ne makes it a question. That's all they're telling you there in the margin. So you see, often they'll have vocab in the margin, defined in Latin, so you sort of learn the Latin as you go from the context. And then they will have other things like the equal symbol means it is the same. If you have arrows pointing different directions, they're opposites. And some other things that we'll see later on. There's a derivation symbol that looks kind of like a little arrow. That means one thing comes from another thing. But let's move on. So in line 12, ubi est Roma? Where is Rome? So ubi is a new word that means where. Roma est in Italia. Rome is in Italy. Ubi est Italia? Where is Italy? Italia in Europa est. Italy is in Europe. Ubi sunt Gallia et Hispania? Where are Gaul and Spain? Gallia et Hispania in Europa sunt. Gaul and Spain are in Europe. Est ne Nilus in Europa? Is the Nile in Europe? Nilus in Europa non est. Now notice each time we say non est, the non, which means not, as I'm sure you've figured out by now, comes directly before est. Non, the word for not in Latin, it will negate whatever comes right after it. So you put it in front of the thing that you want to not be or whatever. Of course, non, technically that's an adverb, so you can put it in front of a verb or an adjective or another adverb, like you could say not green or something like that, right? That would be in front of an adjective. Or not quickly, and that would be in front of an adverb. Okay. Ubi est Nilus? Where is the Nile? Nilus in Africa est. The Nile is in Africa. Rhenus ubi est. The Rhine. Where is it? Notice that different word order. Rhenus, the Rhine, and then ubi est. Where is it? Just a different way of saying where is the Rhine, right? Latin word order is pretty flexible, so you see it change around perhaps more than you would in English, generally speaking. Rhenus est in Germania. The Rhine is in Germany. Nilus fluvius est. The Nile is a river. Rhenus fluvius est. The Rhine is a river. Nilus et Rhenus fluvii sunt. The Nile and the Rhine are rivers. Now notice that fluvius, which is a masculine word, ended with us in the singular, but now fluvii, that is a plural masculine word now. So we've seen a lot of feminine words that end with the A, Italia, Roma, words like that. But this us ending is for a masculine noun. These are grammatical genders. They don't really have to do with like the rivers being guys and the countries being girls. It's not like that. Grammatical gender is something you see in a lot of languages. We used to have it in English, but it's kind of fallen away. So things might be masculine or feminine, or there's also a neuter gender in Latin. People are usually just the gender that you would expect for that person. There are some exceptions we can look at eventually, but that's kind of higher level stuff. So the Nile and the Rhine are rivers. Fluvius, river, turns into fluvii, rivers. Danubius quoque fluvius est. The Danube is also a river. The Danube, or the Ister, is in Eastern Europe. Flows into the Black Sea, if you know where that is. Rhenus et Danubius sunt fluvii in Germania. The Rhine and the Danube are rivers in Germany. Tiberis fluvius in Italia est. The Tiber is a river in Italy. So let's stop there for this first lesson. That gets us through the first section. You notice the little Roman numeral 2 out in the margin, which would start the next section, section 2. But this completes section 1. Hopefully, even though you might have not ever had any Latin before, this should make a lot of sense to you. It's pretty straightforward, just talking about some geography in very basic ways here. And hopefully you've learned some proper names and maybe some verbs. Est, is, sunt, are. Learned the et for and, the in for in, and the little ne that we tacked on to mean this is a question, basically. All right. Very well, and walete.